dedicated to increasing your brand exposure. Monique Lewis Management enhances and increases visibility and exposure for socially responsible brands via press mentions, social media marketing, celebrity collaborations, partnerships, and strategic campaigns. Monique Lewis Management's publicity and marketing campaigns have raised over $10 million in investments, sponsorships, and grant funding for clients. For more information, contact Monique Lewis Management at globalprsolutions.net or call 646-470-4806 and increase your brand today.
Welcome to this episode of the Outfront Podcast with host Vince Noble, the podcast that gives emerging leaders and career transitioning individuals the information and inspiration to thrive and become their best. For sponsorship and advertisement opportunities, please contact info@nobleresolutions.com. And now, your host, Vince Noble.
I want to acknowledge each and every one of you who is stepping into your authentic power today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outfront Podcast. I am your host, Vince Noble. Hey, I am super excited on today. We have the distinct pleasure of having Miss Yasmine Arrington. She is the founder of ScholarCHIPS, a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to funding higher education for students who have parents currently incarcerated. To date, ScholarCHIPS has given away over $300,000 in funding. As always, before we get started with these extraordinary conversations, I want to say as much as I love how intellectual stimulating they are meant to do far more than pique our intellect. They are meant to drive us into meaningful action. So as you listen, our guests are not solely on this show to promote themselves, their services, or products, however, in large part, to provide significant insights and actionable steps to encourage you, thereby helping you to shift you from one level to the next. So I encourage you to listen and to think how you may be positively impacted in some way. It is my greatest hope that you find tremendous value in today's episode. We certainly have a lot to unpack in this episode, so let's go.
Shouts out to Vince Noble. What up? That's the big homie. Help me stack when my pockets was flat. Now I got a grip on me. Information, motivation, inspiration. Make sure that you avoid elimination. Renovation of your finances. I done had more than 5 chances. Vince got more than 5 answers. A celebration, let's hire dancers. All this good game you bet not bypass. Out front, yep, that's the podcast.
Jasmine, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Vince. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It is certainly a pleasure on today. So, Jasmine, to tell us a little bit about yourself, your early childhood influences and growing up, and sort of what has brought you to the work you so passionately do today.
Absolutely. That's a long answer, Vince. You that. So who am I? My name is Yasmine Arrington. Yasmine is my mother chose that name for me. She thought it was so beautiful, and it is. She used to watch a show, I think it was Baywatch, and there was an actress, and her name was Yasmine Bleeth. And so Yasmine is an Arabic name that is a reference to the lovely smelling jasmine flower, and and it also means God's gift. And my middle name is Alexandra, which I believe derives from Alexander, which means defender of humanity. And so that, what is in a name? And I think that as I've gotten older and I've come to understand some of my purpose and divine assignments in life, my name very much reflects that. And I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. proper. So I was raised in the city in the Northwest Quadrant, Ward 4. I am an African American woman. I'm a millennial. I'm 28 years old. DC at that time was affectionately known as Chocolate City. DC is very much gentrified now. Gentrification has its pros and cons, but that's another conversation.
Right.
I am I'm a product of DC public schools, and I went on to Elon University in North Carolina from 2011 to 2015 and earned my bachelor's in strategic communications and history. And then I went immediately from there on to Howard University School of Divinity and HBCU based in Washington, D.C. And I earned my Master of Divinity degree from the Howard University School of Divinity. I am the founder and executive director, as you mentioned, Vince, of ScholarCHIPS, Inc., which is a DC-based nonprofit whose mission is to provide college scholarships, mentoring, and a support network to youth and young adults who have incarcerated parents, inspiring them to complete their college education. I guess in a nutshell, how I ended up doing this work, I really believe I just believe it. No one can convince me otherwise that me doing this work is divine, is uniquely shaped for me, and that it is divine. My plan was that I was going to go into either news media or entertainment media as an anchor or correspondent, and it didn't quite work out that way. But fortunately, in the work that I do, I'm able to sit on the other side of the desk as we're doing today, and be interviewed about my work and story. But long story short, how I came to this work is through my life experiences. My father, you mentioned, Vince, who were my early influences. I had both positive and not so positive influences. My father, who I love dearly, has been in and out of jail and prison my entire life, from the age when I was 2 years old to this very day. And my mother, who I also love dearly, unfortunately passed away when I was 13 years old. That was my freshman year of high school. And but my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, was my primary caregiver along with my two brothers. She raised us, and as a single grandparent, and she did an absolutely phenomenal job with the little that she had. And she took us to church every Sunday. And so I grew up going to Sunday school, to church school, to Bible study. I was in the activities as a liturgical dancer, singing in the children's choir, singing in the youth and young adult choir, being an announcement clerk in church, and also a junior usher. My grandmother and the church I grew up in really laid a solid foundation for who I am today. And my work, I know and believe is connected to my faith and my understanding or appreciation for the Imago Dei, the image of God in every human, and respect of human dignity. And ScholarCHIPS, that was my personal experience, having an incarcerated parent. And so I know the various challenges that young people with incarcerated parents face. There's emotional challenges, psychological challenges, financial challenges, and there's a very real stigma and taboo still to this day around the issue across cultures, across ethnic backgrounds. It's just a taboo issue, and something we don't really talk about often. It's just really an honor. It's been, I think, the constant factor in my life and a major highlight that keeps me motivated, that keeps me going, that keeps me waking, staying up late at night and submitting grant applications, waking up in the morning and taking Zoom calls and, traveling to see funders, all of that. So I think that's who I am.
Right. Hey, that's certainly wonderful. And it sounds as though, a lot of what you do was truly birthed out of the calling to help break the cycle, if you will.
Absolutely.
And you have used all of those experiences, good, bad, right, wrong, or ugly, to help shape you for the good and to help, break a cycle.
Oh, yes.
That's certainly wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely, with our scholars, the thing that I love is, they really do break cycles of poverty and intergenerational incarceration when they graduate from college. And I'll just say really quickly, Vince, when I was growing up, my grandmother is the first in our immediate family to not only graduate from college, from undergrad, but also from graduate school. And she is a lifelong educator. She started off, I believe, as an elementary school teacher, and then the rest of her career has been as a director at various early childhood education and care centers. And she always emphasized the importance of education. She and my mother. And I knew that, I come from humble beginnings, and I knew they really instilled in me that education was going to be a key to more doors to success. Not to say that other doors don't lead to success or more success, but I knew for me that I was going to pursue higher education. And the one thing that many have said, and I know it to be true, is that one of the things that no one can ever take away from you is your education.
Absolutely. So Yasmine, one of the things, I get to ask, particularly now, since the pandemic, how are you and your family doing? And more specifically, how has it caused you to personally pivot in the work that you do and the work that you are committed to doing? And what has you found to be most challenging?
Okay, so my family, fortunately, thank God, is doing well. For the most part, we all are still working. We all have jobs. Our jobs. I have my two younger brothers. They are both in the military. The middle child. His name is Gary, but we call him Junior because he's a junior. He is in the infantry, and Michael, our youngest brother, is in special forces, and they both happen to be located at Fort Benning in Georgia, and they are still there, and looking at what the next chapter of their life is going to be. And our youngest brother got married, and his wife is pregnant, and my grandmothers are doing well. I have two grandparents, my father's parents, and they're based in Wilson, North Carolina. That side of they contracted COVID twice, but but fortunately they're doing well. They're healthy. There've been a lot of deaths in North Carolina, but they're doing well. So I just recently got engaged.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm just very happy. So we're all doing well. In terms of pivoting, the pandemic, when it really kind of blew up in our faces in the United States in March of 2020, everything was uncertain. It was a very scary time. I just remember how scared. I mean, I was afraid to leave my apartment at that time. I was just terrified, and like I had Lysol wipes everywhere I went. I had like the Lysol spray, and I was like wiping down the elevator buttons and wearing gloves and wiping down all the groceries. Like it was just scary. But fortunately, I'm just so grateful because so many lives have been lost. So many have passed on to another realm. And I'm just grateful to still be here and to be able to still do the work that I do. But in terms of like programming for our scholars, we pivoted to 100% virtual programming. So for our scholars, for our alumni, even our board meetings, orientations and sessions with mentors, with our mentees, aka the scholars, all of that has been virtual, and even bonding and social activities. However, recently, this was October 7th, 2021, I got together with 2 scholars and 3 alums, and we met on the campus of Catholic University. We have a partner, ScholarCHIPS has a partnership with DCTV, and they're producing media content, audiovisual media content for us. The first was an interview with me called Impact Moment, and then they're producing a PSA and a short spotlight that we can use for marketing and recruiting scholars. So we met in person together, and of course we've been vaccinated. We were outdoors outside of their student center. We had our masks on, and that was very successful. So I think we feel comfortable enough to maybe do a couple of in-person, small gatherings outdoors with scholars, and like during the holiday season around Thanksgiving and their winter break when they're home from college. But yeah, it's been challenging. I think more so for our scholars and their families as well. When the pandemic first hit, of course, all students, everything shut down, even the universities and colleges, everything went virtual, their classes. And so that meant that scholars were back home, and not all of our scholars where they live is necessarily conducive to studying and right. researching and all, because they've got their siblings. I'm sure, there's people in the house, so I'm sure there's noise and all, and whatever distractions are at home. So that made it difficult for some of our students to kind of adjust. And then especially with their mental health, a lot of our scholars have suffered and experienced depression, feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, and also 3 of ours, it's just been astounding. Even our cohorts are small. We have about 31 active scholars. So 2 or 3 scholars lost a loved one in 2020. 2 of them were by gun violence. And then this year alone, 3 scholars have lost family members. So, we are launching a mental health and wellness program, which is overdue, but I'm grateful that we're able to do it. And we just got an $11,000 grant from a local giving circle called Giving Together to help launch that program. So, we'll be providing counseling services, support groups, and have a licensed trauma-informed therapist on call, on staff, on call for scholars who need an unbiased third party, active listener to talk to. So it's definitely been challenging, even for myself at times, but I'll say this last thing, I'm an ambivert, I've found. And so I do very well in crowds of people, and I get a lot of energy from talking with people in person. However, I very much value my quiet time and my private space. And so actually the pandemic has allowed me to more so thrive in doing the work of ScholarCHIPS. I mean, the organization's capacity is growing at just an amazing rate. We've got new staff members and contractors. We have 7 new board members, and now we have committees on the board. And so I've really been able to do a lot more working from home.
Well, that's wonderful. So, yeah, I really commend you for the work that you are doing. It sounds very exciting, and I look forward to the opportunity to connect with you here real soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Jasmine, in terms of ScholarCHIPS from a programmatic perspective, how are you able to, sustain?
That's a great question. Really, on a wing and a prayer, I'm gonna tell you. but on a more serious note, in terms of sustaining, now that sustainability for small nonprofits and grassroots nonprofits is truly a struggle, and it is truly a journey. To be honest with you, Vince, if I were to, goodness forbid, if something were to happen to me, this organization would tank. And it's not because the work is not important, or it's not because they're not people that really care about the work, but I literally, myself and my team, but it's mainly me, like I have to fundraise nearly from scratch every single year, because a lot of our funds are going towards the scholarships for the students, which they very much need, and book awards, emergency funds. My vision is to get ScholarCHIPS to a place where we have a multi-million-dollar endowment, and then of which, those funds would be invested in some investment account somewhere, and then a percentage of the interest from that account would be able to fund scholarships and book awards in perpetuity. Now that would secure at least sustainability of the scholarship.
Right.
But there are other things that we need to put in place, such as a succession plan and an emergency succession plan, and a little more infrastructure. And so those are definitely things that we're working towards, but it is definitely a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. What sustains me is, I'm trying not to get too spiritual, but, really the spirit that abides in me, my faith and what I stand on, the solid rock is really what helps me to get through day to day, because this work is not for the faint of heart. I mean, I struggle. I struggle, full transparency to this. I've been doing this work for 11 years. I started off, it was a passion project, unpaid, of course. And then as it started to get more serious, and as I, kind of graduated from undergrad, I had an opportunity. We received a grant from it's called the J.M. Kaplan Fund. It's a family foundation out of New York, and they gave us the largest grant we had gotten to date. At that point, which was, I think that was about 2015, 2016. They were giving, I think it was $150,000, and they divided it over 3 years. And so I started off as a part-time executive director while I was pursuing my master's, and then I became the full-time executive director in 2018, in July of 2018. But I have struggled financially. It's not, unless you're in a multi-million-dollar nonprofit and you have the resources to have, decent salaries, the struggle is real.
Right.
That's my story.
Right. So also you sort of mentioned a little bit about some of the mental health challenges and issues with a lot of the children. But on a broader scale, what are the biggest concerns, I guess you would say, and the type of issues or trends that you see present with these children of incarcerated parents?
Wow, that's a great question. There are several. One thing that I've noticed, and I've had this conversation, and I'm not sure what this is about. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's just mothers. But one thing that I'm noticing is, we started the first year ScholarCHIPS was able to get to award and disperse scholarship and book award funds was in 2012. I kind of conceived of the idea based on an aha moment that my grandmother had, that she noticed, like, we were researching scholarships online that I could apply for my senior year of high school, so that I could afford a college education. And she mentioned to me one evening, she said, Yasmine, there's so many creative scholarships out here, but I don't see any in our region for youth with incarcerated parents. So that was the aha moment. And I spoke with her about it, but I ran with that idea. And at the time, I was in a program called Learn Serve International that trains and equips teenagers to be social entrepreneurs and social change agents. And I had to pitch the idea. Then I started to get funding for the idea. And then, Washington Patul Dvorak, human interest columnist, wrote a story about it. It literally... simply an idea and an observation turned into an idea that turned into a social nonprofit that just exceeded my wildest dreams and expectations. But in terms of some of the challenges that I see, and I'll get back to the mother piece, one of which we have difficulty with recruitment. And I believe a lot of that is because there is still a very real stigma and taboo around talking about not only mass incarceration, but more specifically having an incarcerated family member or parent. And so in our schools, and I think this is probably true across the country, but definitely here in the DMV, there's no way for schools to account for youth who have incarcerated parents. We had a few years ago through the DC City Council, there was a motion, moved and it was voted in. It's a form that parents would have to fill out in conjunction with when they register their children for school. And that form is called, childhood adverse experiences. And one of the boxes is that the child has an incarcerated parent. However, as with policy, voting in a policy is one thing, but, enforcing it and having a system for accountability is a totally different thing. So we do have that form, but who is tracking it? And there's just no way to identify them. And of course, we wouldn't want to identify them publicly within the school, but there's no system to do that. So when I go, or one of our scholars, alumni, anybody that represents scholarships goes to a school physically, in person, or virtually, we don't know who the student. We know that there are students in the schools that have incarcerated parents. Just based on incarceration statistics alone in DC, the DMV, and across the country, but most young people, including their parents, aren't like jumping up and down to say, hey, yeah, I have an incarcerated parent. So recruitment has always been a challenge, and we have very small cohorts, anywhere from 5 to 13 scholars per cohort, which is reasonable, though we're able to manage it. And another thing is, one thing that I recognize is that depending on the school, depending on the support system or lack thereof that a young person has at home, and also the preparation and the education level that they received in high school, sometimes the students are not prepared for collegiate level work. Right. And they're not prepared, some of them, for that level of freedom. The young ladies, they do much better. They do very well with the new lifestyle of freedom and independence and managing their own schedule, and they do a lot better, and they graduate at higher rates in scholarships. But that's also because there are more young women than young men. But the young men, they tend to really struggle. And one of the things, as I was mentioning mothers, that is kind of concerning me is I'm noticing that, particularly with some of the young men, their mothers are the ones that usually reach out to us and sort of advocate for their sons. And I think that, of course, the advocacy part is good, I think, and important, but some of the mothers have this expectation that they are going to be the ones to communicate with me and or staff in order to get the scholarships and the information for their sons. But it's like, no, we're working with young adults, and it is now, their life is their responsibility, and we want to communicate directly with them. But then when we want to communicate with them, sometimes the young men they literally will fall into a black hole, kind of go MIA, and we never hear from them. And so when you don't hear from scholars, they don't answer. If they don't answer their phone, they don't respond to emails. If they're not responsive, then we can't disperse the scholarships. We can't disperse the book awards. We can't mentor them, and that's not to say all of them, because we have some phenomenal young male scholars, but I'm very concerned because I'm seeing a pattern of like hovering mothers. So those are some of and then of course, the mental health piece, which we talked about. So those are some of the issues and struggles and challenges that I noticed that are consistent patterns amongst our scholars.
So Jasmine, do individuals typically contact you directly?
Yes. Yes. So in terms of how students find out about us or the community, word of mouth is still a very powerful tool. Pre-pandemic, I would go to a lot of in-person events and speak on panels, and sometimes people in the audience after the event would come straight up to me and introduce themselves, and it might be a mother and say, let me know, my daughter or my son, their father or their parent is incarcerated, and they're in high school, and they might be they're eligible, or they may be interested. Sometimes it happens that way. A lot of young people and young adults are actually finding us just searching online, which is great. That means that we're searchable, we're findable, I guess, if that's a word, online, which is awesome. And sometimes actually incarcerated individuals find us and they write to us. They write letters to us asking for more information, and we have a resource list that we can send out of other scholarships, especially we will send those to all students, but especially those who are out of our jurisdiction right now, because ScholarCHIPS is a local program at this time, although my long-term vision is for it to be national. So most people will contact us and they'll apply directly. However, ScholarCHIPS we do make a good faith effort to reach out to counselors, teachers, principals, administrators at local high schools in DC, Maryland, Virginia, introduce ourselves, let them know about ScholarCHIPS, let them know about the application, the deadline, and the services that we offer. And, we just pray that when we do that, that counselors and teachers, the administrators will do their due diligence and share that information with students and even help them to apply.
So Jasmine, on this scholarship journey, on the work journey that you have began and have been doing for quite some time now, how has resistance kind of showed up for you consistently?
For the most part, when I tell people about ScholarCHIPS, or when they hear about ScholarCHIPS, at least from my point of view, from what I've seen thus far, usually people are very excited about it, and they say, "Oh wow, I never thought about children or youth with incarcerated parents. Like it never occurred to me to think about this population." Or they'll be like, "Wow, that's amazing. That's great." I think thus far, what I've seen in terms of resistance usually comes in around the stigma and taboo of disclosing that information that someone has an incarcerated family member or parent.
Right.
And so with that resistance, because actually I'll give you a quick story. There was a young, and it just broke our hearts. I'm gonna tell you, there was this young lady, she was underage, and we have a consent form, like a media release form and consent form for the students to apply. And if they're under the age of 18, we require a parent signature, or either the parent or their legal guardian, that kind of thing. And so there was one young lady that wasn't quite 18. She was either 16 or 17. And she applied and everything, but we noticed there wasn't a signature. There wasn't a parent signature on that consent form, and we saw her age. And so we contacted her and said, so-and-so, we're going to need it. We confirmed that she was under 18, we will need a signature from your parent. And she said, my mom is not really, she doesn't really support me in this. And so her mother's point of view was like, how dare you? Like, this is nobody's business. And so that is a mindset that, like, in addition to the day-to-day services and programs that we provide scholars with, we have, an advocacy program where, as a part of that advocacy, we work to destigmatize that taboo and stigma, and let folks know it's okay. It's okay to own that part of your story. It doesn't have to define you. And when you share your story, of course, you use discernment with who you share it with and when you share it. But when you do share your story, you'd be surprised how many people you positively impact. You could even save a life just by sharing your story, because you don't know what other people are going through. And so that is what our scholars, as when they are within ScholarCHIPS, they see me talking about my story, they see alumni talking about their story and other scholars, and they go, oh, wait a minute, if they can do that, I can do it too. And it causes a ripple effect. And so we're really trying to do a major mindset shift. And also, even on the other end, in terms of resistance with, like, and it may not be it's not all politicians, but there are people out there who may not be in favor of supporting young people who have incarcerated parents. They may be like, well, why are we supporting them? Like, or why? I saw a long time ago, somebody put a comment online and was like, well, why do they deserve a leg up? And it's like, what? Like, this is barely a leg up. Like, we're not even breaking even here. Considering everything that these young people, they often come from low income families, single parent families. You know what I mean? Like, this is by far, I mean, it's a help. It's an assistance to them, but talking about, oh, why do they deserve a leg up? It's like, what are you talking about? Right. So there's a lot of mindset shifts that have to be made, I think, in order for our work to really go to where it needs to go.
Right. So, Jasmine, before we go, how can people connect with you, some of the things you're doing online or either through social media?
Absolutely. Please check us out. Please check out ScholarCHIPS on our website at ScholarCHIPS. That's with a C as in cookie, ScholarChipsFund.org. And you can find us on several social media platforms. You can find ScholarCHIPS on LinkedIn, on Facebook.com/ScholarCHIPS, on Instagram at on Twitter at ScholarCHIPS, and Instagram at ScholarChipsFundDC.
Wonderful, wonderful. Jasmine, so listen, thank you once again for joining us today. And it has certainly been a pleasure. And I truly do salute you. And please come back and check on us soon.
Absolutely, Vince. Thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We certainly hope that you enjoyed today's episode. So make sure to join our Facebook group, Out Front with Vince Noble. And don't forget to comment, rate, share, and subscribe on the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to download your podcast. Until next time, remember, you still get to write your own life story.